Chapter 882, Core of Mischief. Carrying the iron cigar case in hand, while passing through walls to leave the warehouse that she was hiding in, Sharon strictly followed Sherlock Moriarty's arrangements, using her state as a wraith to fly to the tallest building in Pritz Harbor, the lighthouse. Right on the heels of that, she silently counted down. 3, 2, 1. Before she could gather her thoughts, Sharon's ear resonated with an intense boom. The harbor in the distance seemed to be swept by a terrifying hurricane. She held the iron cigar case in her left hand as her nails suddenly grew sharp before stabbing into the wall of spirituality, completely destroying the invisible isolation with an attack filled with a wraith's spirituality. A sudden gust of wind gushed outwards in every direction as Sharon suddenly felt her spirit body become augmented. And this stemmed from the item stored inside the iron cigar case. She wasn't affected by her curiosity, accustomed to restraining her emotions as she continued approaching the lighthouse at high speeds. During this entire process, she kept maintaining an irregular trajectory, occasionally lunging forward to the left or drifting upwards to the right. At times, she would rely on mirror blink to leap onto a different trajectory before continuing her approach to the target. This made it seem like she was dodging an invisible and terrifying enemy, but Sharon knew very well that nothing was chasing her, nor was she locked on by a distant attack. She felt as though she was performing in a one-man show without any opponents. However, she didn't have any doubts, nor did she waste any time to observe or wait. She pretended that within the air in her surroundings was the silent one Mamosi and the lone military's demigods, doing her best to dodge and slip past them. As her flight continued, Sharon's blue eyes, which were peeled towards the air, had a red stream of light reflected in them. It flew from above, suddenly blasting apart, turning into beautiful fireworks that was a mix of red, orange, and yellow. Sharon immediately retracted her gaze. As she used her wraith fingernails to spew spirituality and reform the wall of isolation, she leaped towards the path Merrick had laid. There were shattered mirrors placed at fixed distances in a periodic manner. With her dainty bonnet and black dress, her figure kept flashing to them, and soon she appeared inside Merrick's brown eyes. She then lightly took a stride out, the iron cigar case in her hand already encased with a wall of spirituality. Merrick and Sharon didn't converse, nor did they exchange looks with their eyes. As though they were being pursued by an invisible monster, they didn't dare stay put. Frankly speaking, they had a general idea about the role that each of their actions played. After all, Sherlock Moriarty had once attracted zombies and shadows with a copper whistle. As for Sharon's mirror blink, the two of them knew its traits well. However, they couldn't imagine how everything would develop. They had no idea how the detective with many secrets would be able to steal the Tutances II mummy under the watch of a few demigods. It wasn't a situation where the mummy could run if it wanted. The demigods were bound to stop it. At this moment, they saw a figure materialize. He wore a black formal suit and a half-top hat. His face was covered with an iron-gray mask, and in his hand was a handful of dark red soil and a dark brown book. It was none other than Sherlock Moriarty. Merrick immediately slowed down his pace. As he allowed the detective to smear the soil onto the book before pocketing it and grabbing his shoulder, he surveyed his surroundings. However, he didn't discover the existence of the Tutances II mummy. Did it ultimately fail? Having been mentally prepared for failure, he sighed as he watched himself, Sharon, and Sherlock Moriarty fade away and vanish from the spot. In the region where the demigods were fighting, the golden-eyed lone military demigod had an ominous feeling when he saw the gray-masked man bow before teleporting away. He felt that things had taken a drastic turn for the worse, into a terrible, unpredictable outcome. He needs to be stopped. Although I don't know what he did, he needs to be stopped. Such a thought instantly surfaced in his mind as the golden-eyed demigod immediately activated his ring. He used traveling against traveling, teleporting to pursue teleporting. However, in this short span of time, he realized that he was unable to lock onto the mysterious person's aura. In other words, he had either created an interference at the demigod level, or he had teleported somewhere very, very far away. Regardless of which possibility it was, it meant that any pursuit attempt would easily face failure. And more importantly, if he were to leave, leaving the lady to fend against Mamosi and the other Rose school of thought demigod alone, that would be an extremely dangerous situation. After all, the mysterious power in the area had not weakened to the point where real firearms could pose a threat to their suppressed selves. Besides, there haven't been any losses yet. The mummy is still around, with the person only taking away some soil rich in spirituality. The golden-eyed demigod swept his gaze at the Tutanses II mummy, who was standing blankly in its spot, before casting his gaze back on Mamosi. Suddenly, the mummy wrapped in yellowish-brown bandages that were soaked in dark red liquid had vanished from the four demigods' spiritual perception. The mummy had vanished without any warning. For a second, Mamosi and the other demigods felt as though they had watched an interesting magic show or a play with a mischievous element in it. But sadly, as demigods, they couldn't tell how it was done. Moments later, having lost their target, Mamosi and the other Rose school of thought demigod didn't hesitate to make their figures fade away in a bid to escape via the spirit world. The golden-eyed demigod and lady tried hard to stop them. After 2 teleports, Klein returned to a 2-bedroom apartment in Backland, which they had rented ahead of time with Sharon and Merrick. "I will pay you based on what we agreed upon," Sharon said just as she found her footing. At the same time, she returned Sherlock Moriarty the iron cigar case. They had previously agreed that regardless of the outcome, Sharon would provide him with the information regarding spirit world plunderers. If they succeeded, she would pay another 3,500 lone gold coins or £5,000. Klein received the iron cigar case, which had corrosive signs on its surface. As he held it in his hand, he sensed Azek's copper whistle lightly jumping inside. He quickly put it away and gave Sharon and Merrick a smile. "Might I trouble you to wait outside? Give me 5 minutes." His tone is very firm. It's as if he has succeeded. What can he do in 5 minutes? It's impossible for him to teleport again and bring back the Tutanses II mummy. This will be more dangerous and more difficult than before. Merrick was filled with puzzlement as his footsteps moved at an obviously slow pace. As for Sharon, she had floated to the wooden door which separated the rooms and passed through it. Merrick quickly reined in his thoughts and followed closely behind by walking out the door. Klein maintained a smile as he watched them. Then, he teleported to another cheap motel in East Borough. He had disguised himself to rent this room in the afternoon. Right on the heels of that, he took out the book with the dark brown cover, which was stained with dark red mud stains. It was Grossel's Travels. As long as the blood still had remnant spirituality and hadn't coagulated, smearing it across the cover would allow the target to be pulled into the book world. And inside the Tutanses II mummy's golden sarcophagus contained such blood. It also meant that, at this moment in time, the mummy was already in Klein's hands, inside Grossel's Travels. After hearing Merrick describe the procedure to making a pharaoh mummy, Klein had roughly come up with a plan. It was to use the corpse's attraction to Azek's copper whistle as spirit body threads. He then controlled the mummy and used this marionette to lead the demigods away from the vicinity of the sarcophagus. He did this so that he could teleport over to retrieve the blood and create the necessary conditions. He had never thought of directly taking the mummy away or getting it to run out of the harbor successfully. It wasn't pragmatic to think that, as it would involve directly facing the attacks from the demigods. And even if he, Merrick, and Sharon were together, it was still beyond their capabilities. It might not even work even if he spent a large sum of money to summon Miss Messenger Rionette Tinecare. Therefore, despite Azek's copper whistle and the mummy's reanimation appearing to be the goal and plan, it was in fact simply a method to manipulate and misdirect. This allowed the other actors to ignore the situation of the golden sarcophagus. This was a plot that even demigods couldn't fend off. This was because they were protecting the mummy and not the sarcophagus. They were targeting the high-sequence beyonders from the Rose school of thought, and not 3 people who were loitering around in the distance with unknown goals. Klein's plan wasn't a plan that was highly interdependent. It was amazingly light and lean while still allowing the plan to be carried out even if there was a tiny accident. He had very few parameters he needed to take into account. As long as the hurricane successfully toppled the sarcophagus, as long as Sharon followed his instructions and moved in an irregular trajectory, and as long as the military didn't have the manpower to easily finish off the Rose School of Thought demigods, all he needed was to wait for an opportunity to appear. After the demigods left the vicinity of the sarcophagus, and that the mummy wasn't possessed by the evil spirit, all he needed to do was teleport over and retrieve something that was soaked in the liquid before escaping. This didn't need him to worry about the exact developments of the demigod battle. He didn't care who gained the upper hand or was injured. He also didn't need the Tutenses I mummy to run a certain distance to consider it a victory. As long as it started moving and became difficult to be caught, there wasn't any problem. Towards the end, his bow was partly to make it easy to scoop up the soil as a curtain call, and also partly to press Grossel's travels to his chest. If any accidents happened, he could immediately pull it out and use it as a shield. It was precisely because of this that Klein could smear the blood-soaked soil across the cover, just as he teleported. Everything ran as expected. The directing was quite a success. As Klein reflected over the matter, he felt his potion's digestion accelerate. He didn't delay as he quickly set up a ritual. He sacrificed Grossel's travels above the gray fog, and then in his spirit-body state, he brought Creeping Hunger, Azek's copper whistle, the Soul Assurer's Beyonder characteristic, and Sharon's anti-hex golden bead into the book world.